Hey y'all, welcome to another episode of Get Real with Kacey Kasem. It's the podcast that goes behind the scenes of the fantasy football industry through interviews with some of the best in the business. For this episode, I got to chat with Zach Berger, someone you may know as the director of content at Fantasy and Frames, or from his new book, The Cocktail Playbook. Zach and I had a great conversation that included his love for sports as a kid, who his favorite players were when he was growing up, how he found fantasy football, the awesomeness that's live drafting, how he decided to create a cocktail book, mental health, what it's like to interview people in the fantasy football space, and a lot more. Please give Zach a follow on Twitter at FFChalupaBatman. You can follow me, Kacey Kasem, at the Kacey Kasem, and the podcast at GetReal_pod. You can find my content with Rotoballer, Fantasy Six Pack, and South Harmon Fantasy Football. And remember to check out SundayDreamersClub.com for some awesome fantasy football inspired t-shirts and sweatshirts. This podcast is a proud member of the DAP Network. And now, here's my conversation with Zach Berger on Get Real with Kacey Kasem. But I forgot to do it this time, so it's going to be one of those things where I'll have to remember to do it. Anyway, now we can get started. This is the fun intro part that gets cut out before that I fade. But here we go. We've got someone with a really cool fantasy football inspired Twitter handle. Yes, that's FFChalupaBatman for you that aren't in the know. Figure it out. We've got Zach here with us today. I'm so excited to be able to talk with you on this show. Like, I've known you for a really long time in this space, and just getting to know more about you is going to be really fun. So thank you.
I appreciate you having me on. And I do love the people that know my Twitter handle. I know exactly then where you stand in the fantasy football space and how far back you may go with TV, because it's from the league. And then I definitely know that people have never heard of the league and they have no idea what they might think I'm like a fan of Taco Bell or something.
Well, figure it out, guys. Figure it out. Anyway, we're here to find out more about you. So I'd like to know, just starting off, we'll get into all your fun stuff, but let's start off when you were a child. How were sports important to you as a child?
Yeah, sports definitely was my main activity outside of school. I feel like I've tried at least every sport. Would not say I was good at most of them. I would say very average athletically is a good way to put it. But I did like Little League for a while. It was great. I was really, really short back then. I mean, I'm not tall now, but I don't go to the expo. Not by choice. I would love to go. I know everyone saw at the expo. I'm very average height at 5'8", but back as a young kid, it was very short and it was kid pitch. So my strike zone was very small. So it was fun to always be the leadoff and just get on base and steal a base. And I did not have a lot of hits, but that's okay. It was fun. Little League, soccer, let's see, rec basketball. Again, another rough sport as a short kid, but it was fun. That I did that for a while, and then I kind of finally, once got into middle school, focused on soccer and did that all of middle school and high school, and then ran track in high school. I hated running. It makes no sense with soccer, but I hated it. I just did track just to stay in shape for soccer. It was a fun group of people. But yeah, that's where sports kind of played in. And then just my dad was much more athletic than I was back then, and he loved sports. He got me into watching all sorts of different things, and we'd always be outside playing. And I don't know, it just feels like a different time now than it was back then. I have my own kids now. I don't know. We don't get a lot of as much outside time as I would love, and maybe it's Florida heat. But I just remember just being outside all the time as a kid, so constantly playing with the neighborhood kids, different games. Yeah, I mean, we just make up games too, just running around, burning energy. It was a good time. So I would say that's kind of where sports started for me as a young child.
Yes. When I was growing up, the same thing. They'd just send me outside and I'd go play with the neighborhood kids, as I knock stuff over here. But yeah, I'd go play with the neighborhood kids and just loving to play sports and making up games, like you said. Like, that was always such fun. And I think kids are missing out if they're not out there doing that right now. But when you were growing up, especially in, being in Florida, did you have any teams that you watched play sports by any chance?
Yeah, so I grew up in Maryland. I spent most of my life in Maryland until after college. I moved down to Florida for work. So Maryland it was weird for football. We'll start with football. So my dad was born in Philly. He only lived there for a year of his life, so he doesn't really count that. He mostly grew up in Maryland. But he was a Cowboys fan, which makes sense thinking about it because it was America's team when he was growing up. They were on TV all the time. So that makes sense to me. But then, so he raised me a Cowboys fan. He never pressured me into it. I wish now. I know you're a Cowboys fan too. It probably would be easier if I wasn't, but at least I'm not a Commanders fan. And yeah, so just I was a Cowboys fan, and then Baltimore Orioles were my baseball team playing Little League. It was really cool. The league we were in, uh, the Orioles had a Little League day every summer. So you'd get free tickets to the game, but then we all got to walk around the warning track and like the dugout before the game. So that was always really cool. I got to do that for a few summers in a row. And Camden Yards is just, I mean, people might say it's not, it's the best baseball stadium. I don't care what people say about PNC Park. It's Camden Yards. And so that was really cool. Washington Capitals, they were not good at all when I was a kid, but then they got better with Ovechkin. Finally won a Stanley Cup in 2018. Unfortunately, I lived down here in Florida at the time, but that's been a lot of fun to be fans of them. I never got into the Baltimore Ravens. I don't know why. I know they're the AFC, so it wouldn't be a bad thing, but just they were never my team. But those are probably my Maryland teams, my main sports. But yeah, it's been interesting being a Cowboys fan in Commanders territory.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't even imagine, like, just because I'm in Cowboys territory, so I don't have to deal with any of the stuff, but, like, being in a different territory, I don't know. I don't know how I could especially if they're in the division, but you know. So growing up, were there certain players or anybody that you looked up to or thought were, like, really cool?
Yeah, so with the Cowboys, it was definitely like Troy Aikman was the quarterback at the time when I first started watching football. Emmitt Smith. I don't really remember Michael Irvin that much. I specifically remember Emmett and Troy. And then I was really into the quarterbacks of that era, like Dan Marino, John Elway was another one. Though it's funny, like looking back as a kid, like I kind of liked all those quarterbacks except for Brett Favre, which now is fine because he seems like a real jerk is my nicest way of putting it. But back then, people didn't know all that. And yeah, just for some reason, like it was always like Denver versus Green Bay, and I was always rooting for Elway and never Brett Favre. So yeah, those are probably the players that stand out the most. Was probably Troy Aikman. He was my first jersey that I ever got as a kid. So that's always kind of been special to me.
Are you still into the Orioles now?
Yeah, so baseball is not really my thing anymore. Of like, I don't follow it all season. Do I support them? Yes, I'll talk about I'll tweet about the Orioles. They have an exciting team now. They've been awful for years and years and years. So it's exciting that they're finally like entertaining. Like last year was kind of a surprise at them being so good so quickly with everything going on. So I'll follow it from here and there. It's more so like I'll wait till October. Hopefully they're there in October. But yeah, I'm not really fun. It's not like when I was a kid, like watching the games. Going to a game was great. Watching on TV is so boring now. But yeah, I mean, I grew up with Cal Ripken Jr., so like that's when I like really love the Orioles. Now I would call myself a fan. I want to see them do well. I'm not following the sport like I follow like football or anything else.
Right, I get that too. Yeah, I'm kind of the same way with the Rangers, and I mean, it worked out well for me this year, or last year, but the the reason I brought up Orioles too, which was cool that you brought that up, was because everywhere I go right now, I know this is coming out a little later than you think, but yeah, Jackson Holiday, I guess, has been all over my feed right now. So the Orioles, like, I guess that's great. I need to follow more baseball. I almost said football. But yeah, being a fan of different sports growing up, was there ever one that you like really wished you were awesome at that maybe you just weren't great at, or something that you didn't even try to play that maybe if you felt like you had the talent, you would have tried to play?
Sure. I mean, it would have been really cool to dunk a basketball. That's
Yes.
that's something I will never do. At least with a regulation hoop. That would be awesome. It would have been cool to be, I guess, better at soccer for as much as I played. But yeah, no, I never really thought of myself as going to be a professional athlete or ever excelling in that world. It was more just I enjoyed being part of a team or even some of the individual sports I played. I enjoyed uh, kind of using my head, if you will, like strategy. Like I definitely felt like I was one of those quote unquote like coachable players, or I kind of like thought like a coach. I could really see myself coaching, and I mean, I coach my my kids' soccer team and flag football teams now. They're very young, so there's not much strategy involved in that. It's more like babysitting everyone else's kids for an hour. But I enjoyed that aspect of sports, is really that strategy piece, that coaching aspect. So yeah, I never really considered myself ever going pro, but it would be sweet to dunk a basketball.
It would. Oh my gosh. So what did you want to be when you grew up?
I mean, if you ask my parents, it would depend on how young I was at the time. They've joked that one time I said I wanted to be a clown when I grew up, which they're probably glad that didn't work out for me. Nothing against clowns. Photographer was up there for a while. I mean, every kid wants to be an astronaut at some point. And yeah, once I got older though, I never really like landed on something. Like I never really considered, like I had no idea what I wanted to do growing up. Once I got a little bit older. But yeah, as a kid, it was your standard occupations: clown, photographer, and astronaut.
Yes, and they're very similar. They're also very
Yeah,
similar. So, when did you find fantasy football?
sure. It was like 2006. So I was, I'll date myself a little bit. I was 16. I'd actually just moved, still in Maryland, but I just moved to like another area in my state, just a little north of different county. And I was like the oldest kid in my neighborhood. There was a lot of younger kids. And so there was like a dad league in my neighborhood, which is cool. I've kind of heard of fantasy football. I didn't really know anything about it. And so they asked me and my dad if we wanted to join the league, separate teams. And I was like, sure, why not? It was a pretty steep buy-in for my income at the time, as a 16-year-old, with a job. So my dad fronted me the league fee, which is great. And I got fourth place my first year, which was cool. It was more fun. Like it was a live draft our first year. So it was just cool to experience getting everyone together in the neighborhood and doing that. And since we all like live there, it was just interesting because I was a kid. I was 16. Everyone else were adults. So I couldn't talk too much trash, because I mean, I didn't know what I was doing either, but it was fun. I definitely got hooked. What definitely pissed everyone off though was back then there were not, if I could, excuse me, recall correctly, we didn't have apps yet. Like I think the iPhone was just coming out around this time. So everything was done on your computer, and I was the only one in school. I was the only kid, and I remember I had like a computer class or some kind of class. I was on a computer. Was it Tuesday mornings, when waivers would run, and so I would always be the first one to pick up players because back then, like it was like first come first. Like it wasn't like how it is now where we have like Fab and all that kind of stuff. It just wasn't a thing in my league. Uh, and so yeah, people would be pissed that I was constantly picking up the best players because I was just available right then on the computer at like 9 a.m. But we eventually changed the settings and I learned a little bit. But yeah, I ended up I think coming in second place my second year, and then I won the league the next year. So that definitely got me hooked. Was doing well. But yeah, it's interesting looking back on it because I had no idea what I was doing. I mean, I followed the sport. I knew the players' names, but I mean, how we understand the strategies now and the concepts of how to draft players and positions and all that. I had no idea what I was doing back then. So it was fun.
So your first draft was a live draft. That's awesome. I love talking about live drafts on here because they're so much fun. Like for people who have not gotten to experience that before, like what is the experience like doing a live draft?
Yeah, it's funny because my first two drafts were live drafts, and then I hadn't done another one until what was it 2 years ago now with the Scott Fish Bowl 12. Um, but yeah, so live draft, budget your time. It's going to be way longer than drafting on the computer. Um, and make it an event. Like it's an experience. Whether it's probably gonna be food, probably some drinks depending on ages. But it's just so much fun where you can talk trash and in a fun way. Hopefully, you're not being a jerk about it, but it's just cool to be able to interact with people, see people really like literally sweating their picks. Because when we're on the computer, like if you're taking a while to make a pick, I can probably guess like you're really struggling with this pick. But to actually like watch you visibly like struggle, and then I can then heckle you. Yeah, it's way more fun. So yeah, nowadays too with computers where we can like do Zoom and stuff like that, I'd definitely recommend that if a live draft isn't an option, at least try to get some of you all kind of together, if you will, in the computer. It just the whole point of fantasy football, in my opinion, is to bring people together. I mean, that's why I love the league that I commission, my home league, is because there's tons of us. We've been playing for years together, but we're across so many different states now, And it's just a way for me to kind of stay connected with some friends that we've, I would say, physically grown apart from a distance. And then we all have kids now and we have lives and we're busy. And so we don't probably talk as much as we should. But during football season, we still have fantasy football and we still stay connected. So, yeah, live drafts, if you can make it happen, do it. If you can't, find a way to at least be a little more interactive on the computer.
Exactly. I love how fantasy football brings people closer. It's so nice to see. So, how did you get more involved in fantasy football from that first league to where you are now? What was the journey like getting into more leagues and learning about more settings?
Sure. So for a while, I was only ever in one league at a time. So I was in that neighborhood league, and then I went to college, and my dad's like, "You probably shouldn't play. You got to focus on school." And I could not tell you how boring that NFL season was because I'm in college, so I'm entertained with that. But like, I don't get every game. I only get one game, whatever's I'm able to see in my network in my area, and I don't care who those players are. Like, if it's not the Cowboys, like, I don't really care because I don't have a fantasy football team to root for. So, yeah, that sucks. I was like, never again. I'm never never skipping another season. So I was back in the league the next year. But it was just so hard with all the guys being up in Maryland and drafting in the neighborhood, and I'm in college. I'm like on the phone with my dad during the draft. I'm in a meeting for school. Like, it was just too much. So I left that league after that year. I was done. I let the dads do their thing. But then I had another friend who had a league, so I joined her league and did that for a year. And I moved down to Florida, so I was like, not really connected with them anymore. So, and it was just like a random group of people, and I just knew a couple of people in it. So then I decided to commission my own league, with like my dad's in it, one of his friends who I know as well, and then a bunch of my friends. And then it's ebbed and flowed through the years. We've had a core group now for a while, and it felt like every year I'd replace like one person, maybe two, and I always try to find someone that was like new to fantasy football because it was a very like competitive but not competitive league. Like, it was a $20 buy-in, so it's nothing stressful money wise, and nobody was like jerks to each other. Like, we're all just there to have fun. So I'd much rather you play in my league, let me help you learn, have fun with it, and then if you like it, stick around next year. And if you don't, like, no harm, no foul. Like, I'll replace you with somebody else. It's all good. So I did that for a while, and then once like fantasy football got a lot more popular, like there was a work league, and then I eventually got onto fantasy football Twitter, and then there's a lot more leagues, and then you end up working for different companies, and they have a league, and then there's a lot of charity leagues. So that's where it really kind of progressed is once fantasy Twitter kind of took off for me. But yeah, for a long time it was really just my one league at a time.
I get that. I don't know when I started adding multiple leagues, but I think maybe it was when I started playing Dynasty. But I like the parallel between you and me, our stories, where I started my league the second year I was playing fantasy football. I just wanted to be a commissioner of my own league and get people in that had never played before so we could kind of all learn together. And I replace people with people that want to get into fantasy football, just don't know, want to be around a bunch of people that they actually feel comfortable with. So I totally get that. And the $20 buy-in's the same too. Like, it's, and we're active and it's fun. So, and we do live drafts a lot of the time when we can make it happen. So lots of fun. Hey everyone, Kacey Kasem here. I want to take a moment to tell you about Sunday Dreamers Club, my fantasy football inspired t-shirt store. If you're looking for unique, stylish, and comfortable apparel that showcases your love for fantasy football, look no further than sundaydreamersclub.com. Whether you're gearing up for the next big game, hosting a draft party, or just want to sport some awesome gear, Sunday Dreamers Club has got you covered. With a variety of designs and styles to choose from, there's something for every fantasy football fan out there. Your support means the world to me, and there are so many ways you can help me grow this new small business. Grab a shirt or two for yourself or as a gift for your fantasy football league mates, or you can spread the word to your friends and family. Every bit helps, and I truly appreciate your support. Thanks for listening, and now let's get back to the show. You brought up the fantasy football Twitter community, and just the fantasy football community in general is so huge. When you found out about that and then started getting into more leagues and all of that, what was that experience like for you? Because that's a whole new world getting on that space.
Sure. So I want to say it was like somewhere between like 2015 and 2017 one of those 3 years. I can't pinpoint it down. I joined Twitter only to get like NFL news before my league mates did, because Sleeper didn't exist yet. Matthew Berry's Fantasy Life app, like none of that existed. There's no like, here's an app that will just give you all the news all in one spot. It was, you went to Twitter. That's where people were posting injury news the fastest, trades, anything like that. So I was like, oh, this is a way for me to get an edge on my league mates, is to get the news first, and then I can go pick up that player or do whatever I need to do, or just be aware. So I did not interact with anybody. I didn't have like my picture on my page. Like, I just followed like Adam Schefter and a bunch of others, like big name news people. I didn't know the fantasy football community existed like that yet. And then over time, just more people were posting more fantasy football stuff. So just following more accounts and more accounts. And then randomly, this was for Scott Fishbowl 9. So whatever year that was, I can't keep track of those years anymore. Someone was talking about it. I entered it. This was like literally as Scott Fishbowl 9 was like starting. So there was no way I was getting into that, but I was able to sign up for the Satellite League. So I still got to do a draft with the same league settings. It was just best ball. And so by doing that is when I started to connect with more people through the Scott Fishbowl, and just I started engaging more of like asking questions, or and it's your standard like questions like, oh, what do you think of this trade, or who should I pick up, or who should I start this week? All those kind of typical questions that we're all used to. And yeah, just from there it kind of grew. Whereas I just got more comfortable being on Twitter and interacting with more people. And then eventually I got into Scott Fishbowl 10 was my first like official year. So then everything changed after that point.
That's awesome. Yeah, the Scott Fishbowl is very vital for the fantasy football community. That's how I've met so many people. I mean, it's crazy how many people you end up meeting just through that. So I think that's probably when I found out about the fantasy football community on Twitter, just listening to podcasts I want to spot, and then like finding out in the chat that all these people were into the same thing that I am. Like, how does that happen? And I don't have that around me in my real life. How am I going to have that? Wow, it's so mind-blowing. So when did you start deciding that you wanted to actually put out fantasy football content? Because that is different than playing in a league, like actually talking or writing about fantasy football. How did that come about?
Yeah, so I wish I had some like really cool story, some like epiphany happened. Nothing like that. So I said I did Scott Fishbowl 10, and then that following year, so in the off season in the springtime, an account reached out to me. No offense to them, I never heard of them before. They had a decent following. I'd never heard of that account. It was a company, not a person. And they asked if I'd like to write for their site. And I was like, I appreciate you reaching out. I've never written content in my life. I'm back in school. I didn't even enjoy writing. Like my least favorite subject was literature and English class and all that fun stuff. So they're like, yeah, no, it's fine. Give it a try. If you like it, great. If you don't, like, no harm, no foul. So I was like, all right, I'll give it a try. I enjoy fantasy football. I like thinking about it. I like talking about it. I just never thought about writing for it. So they're like, yeah, we'll send you the prompts, the ideas. And if you have your own idea, let us know and we'll talk about it. So, all right, send it to me and I'll try to knock out an article every 2 weeks for you. And so they sent it to me. I think I knocked out my first one in like 2 or 3 days. I was like, yeah, send another one. So I did a few for them and then realized like, I want to do more. And it wasn't so much like I want to do more for them. It's like, I want to like learn more. I want to expand more. So I reached out to a bunch of different like smaller teams, like, because I know I'm not gonna go work for one of the quote unquote big fish. That's just not how this works. And I expected a lot of no's, which was fine. That's what I was expecting. I got way too many yeses. I was like, yeah, come on board. So I didn't turn anyone down that said yes to me. So that's how I ended up with like, I think I was on six different teams then. And I loved it though, because I did different things for each of them. I was very clear of like how much time I would need for each thing and what I would be able to do, and they were all cool with it. So it wasn't hard for me from like a demand standpoint. And it also really helped me network a lot because each of these teams, some of them are really small, some of them were quite big. So I got to meet a lot more people, learn from them. They all had different resources I could pull from. So that helped a lot. And then I knew going into my first like in season of doing content, because it's very different from the off season, that I would cut back a lot. And I told them like, hey, just here for the off season. Like we can reconnect in the next off season and see if you want me to keep doing work for you. But for in season, I'm only gonna like work for like these 2 teams, because I knew in season is very different schedule, very different demand, and I was not trying to put that kind of pressure on myself. But yeah, so it really just started with someone just cold DMing me and asking me to write for them, and then just getting the bug and getting hooked. And next thing you know, I'm doing podcasts and hosting podcasts and writing articles. And yeah, it was an interesting experience. I got to learn a lot that first year, but it definitely made the next year a lot more fun.
I'm glad you brought up being with multiple teams, because that's something that you see a lot in this industry, is people that write or put content out for various websites, various different teams. And I'm one of those people. I do that. I'm with 3 right now, and I'm like, how many is too many, And I'm like, I don't know, but I really like the people that I work with, and I really like the people that I work for. So, but I reached out when I first started, reached out to stepmom Lauren, because I knew she was with like a million places. So I was like, I kind of need some advice. Like, and I'm glad that you were talking about like knowing the time, how much time is going to take to do everything. How do you sit down and actually look at that and evaluate how much time things are going to take and how you get a schedule down?
So back then, I tried to give myself at least 2 weeks for an article, and it would never really take me that long. It was just so I didn't have any pressure of if things came up. Because back then I had 2 kids, now I have 3. So between full time of work and balancing my kids' schedule and my wife's schedule, it was definitely, fantasy was not the priority to my family. So I was trying to work around that. So that gave me enough time to like do the research that I felt was necessary, because if I was going to put my name on it, I wanted to give good advice with good research. I didn't just want to throw something together just to have something out there. So yeah, it was like I usually recommended 2 weeks an article, and then I was doing podcast shows, so I tried to limit those to where I was only on one like once a week. I had one that I was hosting, and then every once in a while I would guest on a show. And I would try to be kind of spreading those out, so that way I didn't have like 3 or 4 nights in a row in a week that I was not available for my wife, because I would frustrate her. That she's like, why are you not spending time with me the time we actually have when the kids are sleeping? So yeah, it's just finding that work-life balance, if you will, between work life and fantasy.
And when you're writing content, for starters, like, what were you writing about in those early ages, in the early state of your fantasy football career? I know that you were given prompts, but what kind of stuff did you like writing when you first started out?
So my favorite ones to write were like more like research based and trying to like quote unquote like predict the future, if you will, because that's all we're doing in fantasy football. But I like kind of taking what had happened previous season or previous seasons, something's going on now. How is that going to impact the next season? Who should you be drafting? But I remember my first article, I want to say was like 3 wide receivers that were outside the top 24 the previous season that would be in the top 24 this season. I don't think I got any of them right. Now, like when I went back and looked at it, I maybe got one of them. But it was like those kinds of things where like you want to look at the research, you want to come up with, hey, this looks good to me. Because let's be honest, I can pull any stat from anywhere and twist it to however I want to fit my narrative. So I just try to be genuine with what I believe, and not try to be hot takey. Nothing wrong with having a hot take, but I want to believe in it. And so, yeah, I would just try to find what I thought was interesting, what I thought hopefully other people they might be talking about it, but maybe not from that specific angle, and then just try to give some actionable advice. And hopefully I was right and it helped you. And if I was wrong, I'm sorry. But yeah, those were the more fun ones, was when I could just kind of let the research speak to me, if you will, like kind of give me like a direction to head in, but then I would narrow it down once I like felt like I found something, as opposed to like just trying to find something to find something.
Yeah, I do that all the time. I feel like I start writing and I have to like scrap the whole thing when I start twisting way too many stats to make my narrative work. I'm like, no, it shouldn't be this hard for me to make this person good or bad. I should just scrap this and start over. So I totally get that. when you look at all the content that you've put out, what do you think's been the hardest thing that you've had to do, like a challenge that you've faced while putting out content?
So I think the hardest is actually this podcast inspired me to do my own interview style podcast my second year of doing content. And that was for Triple Play Fantasy. And very similar style to what this is, except for I just did like more shorter form. So it was like a 20-minute interview. It was called Behind the Analyst. So same kind of concept. We're not talking fantasy football stuff. It's more tell me about you. Again, same concept as this. And the hardest part, other than scheduling everyone, because you have to balance everyone's schedules with your own, was doing the research for them. And then I didn't want to, like, I don't know how to phrase it. Like, I didn't want to come off like an idiot because I'm not, and nor do I think I am now, but like, I was not a big name in the space. I don't have a big account, but I was reaching out to people that were big accounts. Because selfishly, I want them to come on my podcast so that way it helps the brand that I'm working for get more exposure. That's kind of the whole point of this. So yes, I want to get to know you and build relationships, but I also want to promote whichever brand I'm working for and get more subscribers, more views, the clicks, all that fun stuff. And so I didn't want to I didn't want to make a jerk of myself. And my very first interview, I'll never forget, was with James Coe, who could not be a nicer person, but we had very little interaction before. I just had reached out to him and he agreed to come on. And I had messed up and left my laptop charger at work. And so I get everything set up. Mind you, I'm like recording in like my bedroom at the time. Like I didn't have like a good like recording space. Yeah, it was rough. And he was running a little late because he had some work stuff tie up. No big deal. I had the time, but I had everything set up, and I didn't even think to like turn everything off because I didn't know exactly when he'd be hopping on.
Yeah.
So we're doing the interview. It's going great. He's awesome, and all of a sudden my like low battery like notification comes on, and I'm just like, oh God, like we're nowhere even near like wrapping this up. Like I don't even know how to wrap this up, and he's just giving like a great answer. And I'm like, I don't know how to, I don't know what to do. And then computer just dies, just
Oh
goes black. So, like I
no.
messaged it, I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry, my laptop died. So eventually I got my wife's laptop, got it all straightened out. Like I had to go back into StreamYard, like end the stream because it was just going. So I was like, well, I can't even use this video content now. Like I can only do audio because it's supposed to be audio visual. It was a mess. And so I reached out to him and he's like, yeah, no problem. Like we can, like if you want to do the ending another time, like we can. I was like, I can edit that together. Like the audio is not a problem. And so we ended up just doing the whole thing over again. Like he was very gracious with the time. So it was all fine in the end. But yeah, I just felt like such a schmuck on my first interview, not having it plugged in, it dying in the middle. But yeah, so it could only go up from there. But yeah, that was
I
tough.
like how you swung for the fences with getting him on your show, James Coe, because like I'm like, hey Russ, come be my first guest, right? Russ Fisher, because it's like that's my friend, right? But then I totally get the whole nerves and things screwing up and everything's just messing up. Like, yeah, when I was interviewing Matt Harmon, like my Wi-Fi kept dropping, and you best believe I went out and bought a cord the next day to plug that sucker right into the, so like I'm not messing around here. Yeah, it's one of those things where you're like, God, you're freaking out, but the guest is probably like, it's not a big
Yeah.
deal. Exactly. It's not.
It's funny because you say like, oh, I swung for the fences, and I did feel like that with James. But like honestly, the first handful of people I interviewed, and most of them that first season, like they're all, in my opinion, like big names, but they don't act like that. Like
Right.
they were all super nice, super gracious with their time. And it was just like a nice friendly conversation. So it is funny like how like I'm sure you go through the same thing. Like I know you had to like interview Matthew Berry and stuff like that. And like I'm sure he was very nice and it was
Mhm.
probably a great experience, but I'm sure you were super nervous at a time because in our mind we just built up like, oh, like we've been listening to them for years. Like they're on these huge platforms and yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, they're just people like us that also love fantasy football. Um, but yeah, it still makes me nervous to to interact with them. And like, I'm friends with some of them now because of doing those interviews and then staying connected over the last couple of years. But yeah, that I still get nervous.
Yeah. The Matthew Berry thing, it was really funny. He's probably one of the most chill interviews I've ever had. It like went on longer than I thought he would have time for. Like, I'm like, okay, you're going to keep talking. You could do this all night. Sweet. Like, it was so chill. And, I wish I was recording video at that time because I saved from like episode 17 to now. I have all the video. I really wish, because he was just so chill, just how he was talking to me and the way he was just hanging out, just having a good time. So yeah, totally. They're just like us, stars. They're just like us. When you ask people to be on your podcast, like how exactly do you go about asking people to join for an interview podcast like you had?
So it's really easy and really hard at the same time. I just DM them. But I try not to be creepy and I try not to be annoying. And so like I have a prompt that I like to type out ahead of time to make sure like everything looks good, there's no typos. And I just say, hey, here's who I am. Hopefully we've interacted at some point, but here's who I am. If we haven't interacted, I might mention that. Here's the show. Here's who it is for. It's going to be audio, video. It's going to take about this amount of time. Like, here's a typical like recording time. Like, would you be available? Are you interested? Like, if not, no big deal. Like, just let me know. And I would say most of the people got back to me. Not everyone could do it, or it might have taken several months for us to like find a time. And I try to reach out like way ahead of when I would need them. So like it was more so like, hey, I would be interested in interviewing in a couple months. Just wanted to reach out now to see if that's something you even be like available for. You let me know when's a good time. Like when in the off season is a good time for you. That's why I did my interview time in the off season, because it's a lot less busy compared to in season, where there's just no time. So yeah, it was really just a cold DM. If I never really interacted with them before, if their DMs weren't open because they didn't follow me, for example, then I would see if there's like an email or if there's somebody else that I could kind of connect through, because I did not want to just like tweet at them. I never did that. So, and if I couldn't really connect with them, then I would just kind of chop it up as like, I'm not ready to interview them kind of thing yet. And like, if we ever connect, we connect. And if we don't, we don't. But yeah, it was that simple. And I say it's hard because you still feel so like vulnerable reaching out to these people that you don't have relationships with. At least I did. But yeah, like I said, everyone was super nice. And if you get ignored, I never took it personally. Like I can't imagine some of their DMs, like how much they're getting blown up with love or hate from their fans and from different people asking questions or whoever they're interacting with. So yeah, there's just send it out. If they reach back, they do. And if not, it's okay.
Yeah, I'm always like, they just missed it, in their inbox. They got so much in there. It's not that they would have said no or that they don't want to. It's just they didn't see it. Sure.
And I'm fine if they want to say no, because I mean, I say no to people asking me too. And I'm, again, a quote unquote nobody. And it's just like, I'm sure they have to protect their time just like I have to protect my time as well. So like I said, I take no offense to anybody that couldn't do it, or if our schedules just didn't work out, because I had a tough schedule to work around as well. So yeah, there's just, again, for anybody that wants to do interview podcasts or reach out, just reach out. The worst that happens is nothing bad's going to happen. They're going to say no, or they're going to ignore you, and it's nothing against you. So yeah, just do it. Don't be creepy.
Don't be creepy. Don't be creepy at all. And I like, there are a lot of hard things about interviewing people, scheduling guests. I mean, there's a lot that goes on. How did you find like working with time zones to be? Because I like to ask that question because I've had so many issues with scheduling because of time zones or things like that.
Yeah, time zones are tricky. Like I think Murph might have been my first international, because he was over in the UK. I eventually interviewed Chris, who's over in Italy at the time. So yeah, plenty of people on the West Coast. Typically, I try to stick with East Coast and Central Time were the easiest ones for me to schedule, because most of my available time was in the evenings. But eventually, with my work schedule change and my kids, I would actually schedule interviews during my kids' nap times. And then just hope that they stayed asleep and I had the monitor with me, because the interviews were only like 20-ish minutes long. So it wasn't too bad. But yeah, that's how, if I was like, if you needed a daytime weekday interview slot, like I had my one day where I was home from work on the weekday and I would schedule it with my kids sleeping. So yeah, it gets tricky. You just have to be very clear when you talk about times of what time zone you are talking about, so then they can do the math and then we're all on the same page of what time we're talking about.
Right? I hate it when like they'll say this time or I'll say a time and it's like, oh, I have it written down. Is it Central or is it Eastern? I have to go back and re-ask what time I said because I don't know. I don't ever write down. Just write 7 p.m. All right. So I also like the fact that you brought up about the off season being the best time to like talk to some of these people because we have more time during the off season. And that's exactly why this podcast has so many banked right now, guys and gals. This is behind the scenes stuff. But yeah, this is the best time for people to jump on and have a conversation. So I'm so glad that you brought that up. And anybody that's deciding that they want to do a podcast like this or just evergreen content, that's the way to go, is to have episodes banked. I hate it when I'm like rushing to get an episode out because I record it and then have to get it out right away. That's why I don't do a regular fantasy football podcast because I can't do it. So, but how did you get comfortable behind the microphone?
There's only, I won't even say if I'm still comfortable yet, but there's only one way to do it, is just reps. You just got to do it. So whether that's your own show, whether I don't recommend doing it solo for your first time, but if you're comfortable, go for it. But whether you're with like a group, whether you're the host or not the host, those are two very different things. Or if you're just guesting on someone else's podcast, it's just getting reps. And I would definitely recommend, if you're only doing like your own show, like with a group of like the same people all the time, is to also guest on other people's shows, because being a guest with someone you have not worked with is very different than being with the same people every show.
And then when you're interviewing people, how do you exactly prepare for that and like know how the conversation's going to flow?
Sure. So with mine, because it was like a 20 to 25 minute kind of like expectation, it was what I was aiming for. I always had 4 questions that I wanted to ask them, and I would try to always keep it 4 different questions for everybody, where I try to do some research on them. I mean, we're all over social media, so just trying to kind of dig up their maybe where they're from, or if they've ever talked about like any teams they like. So try and find something that like connects to them personally, and then just some like more broader questions, but about like what they do, or what they've done in the past. And then if that kind of leads into like some extra questions that are little tangents, great. If not, like, it's okay. We got the show sheet. I already know where we're going. And then I always finished off with like some rapid fire questions that were purely like just fun, silly questions. And I would try to kind of theme them to the guest in some way. And yeah, that's really all it was. But I would take the research very seriously. I didn't want to, my goal was to not ask the same questions that they were always getting asked. And some of them you have to, it's just the nature of the
Right.
beast. But I would try to find some different angles, just so in my mind, if I was trying to put out a good interview, a good show, if it was something that they've already said in a bunch of other podcasts, and why would someone tune into this specific interview, other than they might just like that person? So that was kind of always my goal, was to try to find a different angle and just keep it light, keep it easy. But yeah, I always had a show sheet for each one, just to keep myself organized. But I would tell them like, hey, we might go off script, we might stay on script. There's been times where I completely skipped a question before and realized, hey, that was a great question, and I never asked it. It is what it is, kind of thing. And just kind of go with the flow.
You probably like, where's the show sheet for this one?
Oh no, I've done plenty of shows without show sheets. For
Yeah.
me, I needed to have my own show sheet. But
No, I get that.
been on plenty of other shows where I did not have a show sheet, and that's totally fine.
I think the first time I got a show sheet, I was like, oh, what is this? Like, I had never, because I was on the open bar for so long, like they never had a show sheet. So I'm like, okay, what is this? But I like having that. And I do have a general, outline of how it goes, but I never give anybody any of the questions ahead of time. I'm not the thing that you do, but you know what I mean? Like everybody's different on how they do stuff. And that's why I love doing this podcast, because I find out how people do things, like, because we're all different. It's insane. So if you're listening to this podcast or any of the previous podcasts, like, you're going to hear so many different stories from people doing things completely different than other people, saying this didn't work for me, it works for this person, it doesn't work for me. And that's why I love this community, and I love all the people that put out content, because we're so different. So thank you for that. How about just moving on to like being a director of content for Fantasy and Frames? Like, What exactly does that mean for people that don't know what that is?
Sure. So I would say probably for different teams, it means different things. For me with Fantasy and Frames, um, I'm kind of I provide the direction of where we're going for whatever part of the season we're in. So like off season right now, it's mostly prospect content. So kind of organizing when are we going to start putting out content? When's kind of our downtime? What is the goal? So like a couple years ago, we transitioned to more YouTube, more video content, where before that it was all articles. So, and we did that for various reasons, because of the goals of the company. So just trying to align all that together. And then, okay, the NFL draft happened. Now we need to do more. We can talk about rookies still because now they're on a team. So now's a good time to talk about them. But now let's get more dynasty content where any players, who are we buying, who are we selling, that kind of thing. And then you get to a certain point where, okay, it's July now. It's time to start talking about redraft. And that's kind of your typical off-season schedule. And then within that, we have shows every week for IDP, for redraft, not so much right now, but eventually we'll get redraft. But you have Dynasty for college, best ball. So there's lots of podcasts going on that's separate from like even like our video content / article content. And then in season again is a completely different animal. So you got to map that out ahead of time of what are your staples. Like you always have to have waiver wire content, your start sets, that sort of thing. Is there anything else we want to do during the week, or is that what we're going to stick to and then just have our podcast? So it's also gauging how big our team is. I think I doubled the size of our team last year, and then we've added a few more this season just because we knew our goals were to put out more content without giving all of us too much work. Because if you're going to burn out your team, you're not going to put out good content. It's not going to work. So it's just finding out, okay, who in the off season has time? Here are the expectations. Trying to be really loose with it, but just communicating with each other. And then in season is a completely different animal. So you have to really stick to a strict schedule. So again, it's not for everybody, and that's okay. So yeah, that's kind of my role as director of content, is just to kind of keep everyone organized, keep us in a certain direction. And then I try to let people do their own thing. We Fantasy Frames, we have a director for each kind of type of content. So like we have a director of college fantasy, of dynasty, of best ball, of redraft, and we might have multiple directors for each one. And I like to let them kind of decide what content they want to do. And then I work with them. I help with their graphics. So we might have a template. And so here's our template. And then with each player profile, for example, I just plug in the information, go record your video. And it's really easy to put everything together, and we streamline it. Whereas like show topics, like I don't want to tell anybody what to do. I'm happy to like bounce ideas. Like if you're not sure what to do, like let's talk about it. But otherwise, like, you know what you're doing. I trust you. Like go have fun with it. Because if you're not enjoying what you're talking about, it's not going to be good content. So I definitely try to minimize any kind of here's what we're doing kind of thing. It's more go do your thing. If I have an idea, I'll share it with you. But otherwise, I'm going to let you run with it. So, and I'm sure other people that quote unquote are directors of content do it very differently than what I do. But that's how it works with our team.
Well, I like that. I like being able to just kind of figure out what I want to do and put my own spin on something, so really enjoy that. With the video content portion of putting out content, video has blown up. I mean, obviously it keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. How do you make sure that you guys keep it fresh and that the stuff you're putting out is like really great quality?
So it comes down to having a combination of sounding good when you record, having kind of a script without like having a script. So have a idea of the map that you want to say. If it's bullet points, if you need to write it out completely, that's fine. But that way it's a very kind of tight pack of information. So you're not just talking to talk. Just say what you got to say and move it on. And then having the graphics with the video really makes a difference, because if I'm just talking about a player for 10 minutes and all you see is my face, that's wonderful. But I'm going to be giving you lots of stats, lots of numbers. I don't know how much you're really going to like absorb. Whereas if I leave it on the screen while I'm talking and you can visually see it, that might be a lot more impactful, where you might not remember everything I said, but there might be a couple of numbers that really stood out to you. So making sure that the graphics look good, they look clean, easy to read. that goes a long way.
Yeah, for sure. And that's the content that I like to consume is the stuff that actually shows me the stuff while I'm listening to it. So thank you for that. Okay, I want to talk about this new venture that you've jumped into with the Cocktail Playbook that you have out right now. Can you tell everybody how that idea came about and why you decided to do it?
Sure. So we'll go back a little bit further than when it first started. So I enjoy drinking alcohol. It was mostly back then beer, and I noticed people would like talk about different beers that they would be trying, and everyone has different beers around them and different distribution. So my wife got me like a gift one year for Christmas. It's called Beer Drop, and I'm sure there's a bunch of different kinds of companies that do the same thing. And basically every month I get a pack of 5 different beers, 2 of each, and I get to tell the company like, here's what I like, here's what I don't like, and then they gear those beers around that, and I can always swap them out if I want to. But they're all from all over the country, and so I'd just post about them, and some people would engage with that, and it was fine. Um, and then I decided like I didn't really drink liquor that much anymore, mostly because like I just have young kids back. I still have young kids, but I think there's a connotation, at least for me, it was like drinking liquor was like partying, like getting drunk, like all that. And I was like, well, no, I'm not in college anymore. Like I can have a quality cocktail without trying to get wasted.
Yeah.
So I was like, well, I want to like get back into like drinking good like liquor, not just trying to get wasted in college, which again, nothing wrong with that. Just that was not my goal at the time with my kids. So I was never really into like whiskey, bourbon, scotch, like all that kind of stuff. Like that wasn't really for me, but I wanted to give it a try. And man, if you ever need some opinions, just ask people like what bourbon, scotch, or whiskey they like, and everybody's got an opinion about it that they're very passionate about, which I appreciate the engagement. And so I bought a bottle of it was scotch, posted it, and was just like, hey, like here's what I got it for. Like, how'd I do? Like, I don't know anything about this, and lots of engagement. So I was like, oh, let me make a cocktail, and then I just started like making more cocktails, posting them. People seemed to like that, and ask me questions. A lot of people think that I was a bartender or am a bartender. I have zero bartending experience. Um, it's literally just I know a little bit of mixology. Like I've read up on some stuff, but it's me just either following recipes or getting ideas from other people and just putting stuff together, and it's all kind of just basic formulas, if you will, when you put a drink together. But yeah, that's kind of where it started, where I was just posting drinks and then just kept posting them, and people really seemed to like seeing some of my drinks. And then Jen Piacenti was like, you should do a book, like you should do drinks for like NFL teams. And I'm like, yeah, okay. um basically like that's a great idea, like I'm not gonna do that. But then like the idea did not leave my head. I was like, can I like what does that even like look like? And so like I thought about it for several days, and then like reach out to some people. I was like, hey, if I did this, like, do you think people would even care? Like, am I just wasting my time? Would you find it interesting? And they're like, no, you should do it. Worst thing that happens is you do it and nothing happens. Like at least you can say you did it. So I was like, all right. So then I kind of looked into like, how do you publish a book? Like I don't know anything about that, and I've learned a lot over the last several months of what that's like, because there's a lot. And so yeah, I decided to make it happen. I mean, the fantasy community was amazing in helping me raise some funds so that I could get it published. Um, and yeah, so I put a lot of work into it to make sure that like this is like that imposter syndrome stuff, and I know you and I have talked about it before. I have an episode about it on my
Yep.
on a mental health series thing, and it was one of those things where like I didn't want to feel like I didn't do it justice, especially like after so many people donated money to me, which is really weird to ask for money. Like that made me uncomfortable, but I felt like a lot of people put their faith in me, if you will, and I didn't want to blow it. So I really wanted to do everything I could to make it as like professional, as legit as possible, look as good as possible. And so yeah, it's by the time this recording comes out, it will have been out for probably a good month plus since it just released. And hopefully by now people have it in their hands because there is a little bit of a delay of shipping it for the hardcover. But yeah, you should have it by now if you've already ordered it. And yeah, that's where it all started from. And now it's funny because now some people who haven't even seen it yet because they don't have it in their hands yet, they're like, "Oh, you should do one for like other sports." And maybe I will, maybe I won't. I don't know. But it was a really cool experience to get to do all that. And now I am curious to see like what the response is once people actually get it. And then I have different ideas of how I want to market it, like outside of the fantasy football community, because as wonderful as the community is and as supportive as everyone has been, it's still a pretty small bubble. So if I want to see the book kind of expand, if you will, I definitely need to market it outside of the fantasy community.
Yeah, I think that's something I struggle with is how do you market outside of the, you know what I mean? Like I figure it out. I watch a lot of videos. Listen to a lot of podcasts. I do all of that stuff. I know I have to figure it out basically on my own. I can use these resources, but at the end of the day, I got to figure it out. So where can people find that, by the way?
Sure. So it's on Amazon. Just search the Cocktail Playbook. It's all over my Twitter as well. I post about it a lot, and I'm sure even when this comes out, I'll still be posting about it a lot because I don't know when you see my tweets or don't see my tweets.
Right.
But yeah, so it's really simple, and also by then it might be on Barnes and Noble as well. And I'm working with Amazon to have expanded distribution, so it might even be picked up by random bookstores or whoever if they want to buy it. That's out of my control of whether they buy it or not, but will it be available to them if they would like to purchase it and then sell it? But yeah, Amazon's the easiest way, and you can buy it internationally. Though I have learned that there are extra expenses with taxes internationally, so it may not be as affordable as it is in the U.S. But it is technically available. And worst case scenario, it's also on Kindle. So I don't think you have to deal with the taxes through Kindle. And if you're in Kindle Unlimited, it's free. So
There
yeah,
you go.
that is another option.
Yeah, so go get that, guys. Y'all go check that out. Get it for the Super Bowl, get it for your live drafts, get it for just to have because alcohol, I
Yeah.
mean, I like alcohol. So, do you have a favorite recipe that's listed as one of the teams and their drink?
So there are some that I would definitely be more interested in, and I don't think I really talked about even what the book is, just how I came up with
We're
the
just
idea.
kind of like, yeah.
So basically, it's 32 recipes. It's one for every NFL team. I couldn't use the word NFL in the book though, but you'll
Yeah.
know who I'm talking about very easily. Because I just use the cities because that is not copyright, and they're all themed to each team. And I did that based on either the city, the mascot, the color. Not so much the color because some colors just don't look good as a cocktail.
Brown?
Well, brown's very popular, but
I
yeah,
know
I mean, the
brown is
brown,
very
that is
popular.
an easy one, but, purple for the Vikings.
Purple.
I did make
Yeah.
that drink purple, but,
Oh.
yeah, some of them aren't as easy to make it look good or with the proper ingredients because I wanted to use good ingredients that
Yeah.
also weren't hard to find because I was, like, looking into some things and, like, good luck trying to find this, like, one random obscure ingredient that you only need half an ounce for. Like, I don't wanna waste your money for
Why?
half an ounce. So yeah, they're very accessible recipes, very accessible ingredients, and a lot of them actually are based on like the cities. Like I will, without spoiling too much of the book, like Chicago Bears. I found out through my research that old fashions were kind of discovered in like came from Chicago. So obviously the Chicago had to be an old fashioned, but I didn't want to just make a just normal old fashioned. So there is a twist on it that has to do with the Bears. But stuff like that, where I wanted it to be more regional for that city because the whole concept too is if you're buying the book you're probably a fan of a team so you might want that drink, but then if you're doing a party like you said you can make a couple different drinks for the different teams or try them all at some point. But that was kind of the goal, is just to have fun with it, and hopefully especially the ones that live in those cities they probably recognize the concept behind each drink, and hopefully it fits for them. But yeah, that's where that came from.
That's such a cool concept. So I'm really glad that you were able to get that out there and people can purchase it. Go get it. I'm going to keep saying that. Please go purchase that. Help support Zach. He is an awesome dude. So please do that. All right. I also wanted to talk to you because you had brought up the mental health series. What exactly made you just decide that that was something that you wanted to partake in as well?
Sure. So before the series or anything like that, I did try to talk about mental health on my own Twitter. More so because there's a stigma, a negative stigma that like going to therapy is like you're either quote unquote crazy, there's something wrong with you, you're weak. And I don't fault anyone for thinking those things. I thought the same thing for a long time. And I had depression, I had anxiety, still have anxiety, but I didn't get the help that I needed right away because you're in denial and you don't think you need that help. And I wanted to kind of put it out there like there's nothing wrong with needing help. And I think there's a lot more people going through mental health issues than you might realize. And that a lot of us are very similar while also being so unique. Because I'm sure most people think like I'm the only one that has this problem or thinks like this or whatever you're dealing with. And maybe very specifically you are, but in a broad sense, I guarantee you so many of your friends and family, or even if you're following tons of people on Twitter, your favorite people on Twitter, or your favorite people like in the NFL go through the same issues you do. And we just don't talk about it enough because it's not really something that's in the mainstream. So that's really where it started from. Was like, I don't mind talking about my journey as much. And I don't get into super specifics, but I can say like, hey, like I went to therapy today and it was a good session. Here's a big topic for me, or here's what I struggled with. And just trying to make it more accessible, more easy to talk about, more of just a normal conversation. And that led into wanting to do a mental health series with Fantasy and Frames because there's a lot of great mental health shows out there. Like the FF Face Off does an awesome podathon every summer. And then there's a lot of other great people that put stuff out. And that's wonderful because it gets people talking about it. But I realize none of us are experts at mental health. We're all just sharing our own experiences, which is wonderful. And I think we should continue to do that. But then I also realize, hey, my wife is an actual mental health licensed counselor, a therapist. So why don't I leverage her skill set and her professionalism to share more information? So we decided to do a series where basically the concept was taking a mental health concept idea and kind of break it down for just an episode for 10 to 15 minutes and make it very easy to digest and then just kind of build on that each week. So kind of start at one end of where you would start, like if you were in therapy, and then build off that because you can't just get right into the deep stuff day one. Like you got to work up to it and you got to work on different coping skills and different changing your thought processes and your thought cycles. So all that kind of stuff. So that's where that generated from. And that was very exciting. I have some ideas for this summer. It will not be the same thing we did last summer, and that's still on Fantasy and Frames at YouTube. So it's evergreen. Anybody can watch it. I like to share it when people are struggling with different things. I like to share an episode to them of like, hey, here's that concept you're talking about. So it can work in any order you want to watch it, or if you want a specific concept. But yeah, I just think there's a lot of we're in a mental health crisis as I'm going to say as a nation. I would probably say as a world. We just feel it in this country. And I think it's just because we don't feel comfortable enough talking about it, among other things. But I think that's where we can at least start. It's just, there's nothing wrong with talking about it. So that's why I like to talk about it.
That's awesome. Yes, I love it when people talk about it because I go through things. We all go through things, and I don't know. Sometimes life is just a lot coming at you at one time. So taking a breath and kind of like the other day I'd posted about imposter syndrome and you had posted the episode on that. And yeah, they're all really cool to go check out. If you're having kind of a blah day too, you can go in there and kind of watch something and be like, oh, I'm not the only person that feels like this. So that always makes me feel better, is to know that I'm not the only person. So thank you so much for that and for just being such an ally for others and being so supportive of other people. It means a lot to us. So thank you.
No, I appreciate
it. Let's talk more about not more. Let's just talk about what you like to do in your free time. When you have free time, what do you do? What do you like? What do you enjoy?
Yeah, I'm laughing because I'm like, oh, what free time?
Yep.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of free time. So my free time is mostly taken up by doing stuff with fantasy football or like the book. and now working on like trying to market the book. And then I enjoy TV. I probably watch too much of it, but that's just something my wife and I can do after the kids are asleep. Whether we're still cleaning up stuff around the house, I can have the TV on, and I can multitask with the TV. So yeah, a lot of trash TV, and then just some good classic Netflix shows and stuff like that. But I would, yeah, the little free time I have is spent between fantasy football, getting stuff done around the house, which is not really free time, and watching TV.
Yeah. What is free? I remember doing things. I remember having a life outside of like work, and then family is great. I love family, but like the chores part sucks and all that stuff when you'd rather be watching TV or, going out and doing something. But hey, it doesn't always happen. But what's something that maybe you look forward to in the future that you haven't gotten to do yet? Anything. It doesn't have to be fantasy football related. It could just be anything in life.
That is a great question. I would say travel. I never really travel. I mean, I traveled a little bit, but not a ton. And then I had kids, and I see tons of people traveling with kids, and I am in all of you, and that is wonderful. I have no desire to travel with my kids at the age that they are. Just the hassle of it, the amount of money it takes. So eventually we will get to the point where they are old enough that I feel like it is worth my money and my time. And yeah, I look forward to being able to travel more in the future.
Yeah, so go buy that book so he can get out there and travel, guys. For real though, like that's what
I
I
promise.
like.
If you're writing a book to make money, you're wasting your time.
Hey, I'm just trying to give you a little bit of extra, oomph.
Oh no, I appreciate it. I'm
You
just
gotta
putting it out
have
there that yeah, that
she'll make
if
it
you
an
want to write a
empire.
book, yeah, I fully support people wanting to write books. It is a great thing to do. It is not going to be a moneymaker for you, most likely. So do it because you're passionate about it, not because you're trying to make money.
Yes, do it because you're passionate. And that's great advice though. To just do something because you're passionate about it. You don't have to, it's fun, right? It's fun.
Mhm.
So that's what you do in your free time. You have fun. And that's what you do outside of being able to go travel. You still have find things that give you pleasure. So that's awesome. Ha- Right, going back to writing, do you read a lot of books, or was writing something just something that you? I'm just wondering. I don't read any books. I know I sound like an a-hole, but I don't read any books.
I couldn't tell you the last time I read a book. It's been years. Um, when I was younger, I did enjoy reading. I've never liked writing. That goes back to school. Even now with like articles, I can't tell you the last time I wrote an article. Most of my content now has been video content, and I don't even really make that much content anymore. And yeah, I mean, like I the books I read now are my kids' books. I read a
Yeah.
lot of kids' books now, which is great for them. And like my oldest is 7.5, and he's reading a lot more now, so it's great to like have him read to me. So that's fun. But yeah, I there's nothing wrong with reading, and I enjoyed reading a lot when I was younger, but I just don't have the free time now where I think to myself like, "Hey, I got a little bit of time. Let me go read a book."
Yeah.
It's just that just is not my motivation anymore.
Yeah, my wife likes to read all the time. Like before we go to bed, she's reading, and I'm like, I tried. I've got the same book on my Kindle from December that I've like read like 4 chapters because I'm just like, it's not interesting. It's not
Yeah,
interesting. I'd rather watch some fantasy football content and
yeah.
listen to some podcasts and do all that.
I'm reading Twitter. I mean, it's the same
Yeah,
thing.
exactly. It's the same thing. It's not, I mean, let's not get a little crazy here, but okay. So wrapping up. Well, before we wrapped up, I actually had a question because you brought up your kids, you brought up the fact that you coach their soccer, their young sports, seeing a bunch of kids running around. I remember being a little kid playing soccer and my mom was the coach. Like, how was being a coach for a child's team?
It is not easy. So I do it with my wife, which is great because I cannot handle the really young ones because we started when they were 4, 3. I think it was 3 and 4-year-olds, and then it's 5 and 6. Yeah, something like that. So like the 3 and 4-year-olds, it's like herding cats, literally. Like when they joke, like I'm just hoping they stay on the field. I don't even care what direction they're running in. I don't care if they're involved in the play. If they're on the field, that is a win that week. And there's like at least one kid that that at least he or she is trying. The rest of them, I'm just hoping they're not running off crying to mom or dad because they just don't want to play. As they get older, it does get easier. I can kind of teach them a little more of the rules, the technical skills, what a pass is, like a little bit more. So it definitely gets a little easier, but it's been a lot of fun. And it's nice that it's not a competitive league, obviously, as young as they are, but they even preach that in like the league is like I don't like, do I know the score? Sure. I could care less about the score. We don't keep score. We don't have a record. It's literally just, I'm just hoping they stay on the field. My goal is they're better the last week of the season than they were the first week of the season.
Yeah.
And I pride myself in trying to be a good coach because no offense to some of the other coaches in my leagues, they're awful. And I wouldn't trust my kids with them. And not in the sense that they're not good people. It's just, I wouldn't trust my kids to learn anything from them because they don't know what they're doing. And so if my kids are going to play a sport, then I feel confident that I can coach them in a way that they're going to learn. And yeah, so it's been nice though to see how many parents that want to come back and have their kids with us, because we do really value them learning. And it's not just, hey, I just want to go see my kid score a goal. I don't care if my kid scores or doesn't score, and they don't score a whole lot. It's okay. Like, I just want them to learn and get better. So yeah, it is not easy trying to explain certain concepts to kids that young. They don't have any attention span. But it is rewarding at the end of the day.
That's awesome. Yeah, I don't have any kids, so I don't really know a whole lot about that aspect, being a parent and stuff. I used to work with kids, so I know how trying to like get the attention of like a group of kindergartners is just not my playbook. I can't do it. So many props to you. Many props to you. Can you go ahead? We're going to go ahead and wrap this up. I know you would want this to go on for hours. I would too, but we've got to wrap it up. Zach, before we go, can you just let everybody know where they can find you, what you have going on, etc., etc., etc.?
Sure. So I am at FFChupaBatman on Twitter. That's the best way to see anything that I'm talking about or content that I'm putting out. Like I said, I don't really put too much content out anymore, but I do support some different teams. So like definitely go and follow like at Fantasy and Frames or sub to them on YouTube. But we have a great team over there, and they put out a ton of great content. And yeah, then it's just the Cocktail Playbook right now is kind of my baby, trying to see where we can get that. So if you are so inclined to purchase one, I appreciate it. That is great. If drinking is not your thing, I get it. No pressure there. But it does make a great gift for any friends or family you do have that might enjoy football or enjoy alcohol. It works either way. They will enjoy it, I promise. So that is a great way. And then I'm just trying to have some fun. I know you're making t-shirts and doing all that, and I'm just trying to have some fun with merchandise as well. So that's on my on Twitter as well. But that's just some fun designs that go along with the Cocktail Playbook. Whether it's a t-shirt, a hat, stickers, magnets, if there's something that, if you really like the book that much and you want to kind of show off some different drinking memorabilia merchandise, and I have that as well. But yeah, like I said, easiest way, FFChupaBatman, and hopefully I don't drive you crazy with all of my tweets about cocktails.
You don't. Getting out something that you have a passion about and getting it out to others, I never fault people for that. Do your thing. You should be proud of the work that you're putting out. So do your thing. Thank you so much, Zach, for coming on. Everybody needs to go check out what Zach's got cooking. Go look at his Twitter, follow him, go buy the book, go just support him, please. Supporting is so important in this space, and I appreciate all of y'all for supporting me as well. And I wanted to thank you, and I wanted to say that you should come back next week for another episode of Get Real with Kacey Kasem. You also should remember to stay rad.
Get real. Time to get real, everybody.